And good afternoon, Phyllis.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
As you know, I'm Fred Harland, and this is Richard Clarke. And it's good to be with you again on Zoom, even though we don't have an awful lot of other people. And as Richard said, this is a bit of a new experience for the two of us. So we'll be learning as we go along, and please bear with us. And as Richard is saying, sometimes our internet service develops glitches. So if for some reason or other Richard doesn't come through, please wait on the line for a minute and hopefully it'll self-correct.
Okay.
Now getting on to the stuff. We have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about today. And here are the top 9 that Richard picked for this week. Here are the top 9 that Richard picked for this week, Phyllis. Might new strains of COVID-19 prevent a workable vaccine? Another suggestion, to improve your chances of surviving COVID-19, take some blood pressure medication. Are you worried if the US Army's generals are not human, but instead are all AI, artificial intelligence? Can we make useful stuff out of fish waste? And now the Chinese are raising money for a space launch firm, just as we've seen here. Bacteria, it seems, can do so much. Now perhaps they can make plastics. Should we genetically modify plants to make medicines? Before you die, how should you manage the data that you leave behind? And finally, Fitbit's new smart monitors do so much, including personal medical stuff. Should we get a Fitbit? And now before Richard talks about these items, he'll provide maybe a little bit more information on Zoom. Richard.
Well, since what I have is slides and pictures, then we're not going to take this very far. Anyway, we'll talk about it next time. You know about Zoom. You can mute and unmute yourself and turn your video on and off. The thing that I wanted to show you is where you can select the different view, but since you can't see any view, none of it is useful. And so let me just go ahead and start with the first story then. The headline is US COVID-19 patient recovers and tests negative, but later gets sick from new strain of COVID-19. And this is a 25-year-old man from Nevada, and he had recovered from COVID, tested negative for it, and then been reinfected by a slightly different strain of the vaccine. And so he originally caught it in March, got cured by April, and got sick again in May. And it turns out there are multiple people around the world where they have gotten reinfected. And in China, in Wuhan, about 10% of the people who had gotten COVID-19 to begin with and recovered, again, were reinfected by a new strain. One of the things that, you know, these viruses continue to mutate and mutate fast, and this makes it look increasingly likely that we will have to get vaccinated every month or so with some new version of the virus. So it's hard to know what is going to happen with the vaccine.
Wow, so, that's really worrisome.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was afraid of, and this kind of confirms the fear, what are you going to do with the vaccine? You know, they give a flu vaccine every year, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work. It looks like COVID might be worse.
And I haven't seen many other stories that have talked about how this could impact new vaccines. It'd be interesting to get some other people to comment on this because it does sound so problematic.
Yes, I have been looking for those stories too, because I've been reading episodic stories like this for about a month. And I haven't seen, this is the first time I saw it picked up more in the press.
Wow.
So anyway.
I have heard that there were a lot of different strains because of many mutations. And that's one thought that occurred to me, that it's going to be, you know, a different infection, you know.
Yes.
As they're saying, and that's come out. That's is quite worrying.
And
is it possible that any new vaccines might be able to deal with more than one strain?
Who knows? Who knows? It depends on what the vaccine basically is attacking and whether that's common with all of these different strains or not. They were able to make a polio vaccine that worked and worked over a long time, and polio is a virus, so I don't know. But I don't like it. I don't like it. Now,
no,
also,
it's all new.
I'm reading stories now, initial stories saying in Southeast Asia, there's a new strain that the reports say it's 10 times worse.
Ooh.
Wow. And that was in South Korea.
Yes, so anyway, it's worrying. That's why I put this story at the top. So we can,
it made me worry.
That's right, so we can worry as we listen to everything else.
But Richard, if you want to worry less, how about the idea of taking some blood pressure medication to improve your survival?
Yes, now this is interesting. This was a scientific study by people from the University of East Anglia, where I have no idea where that is. And what they found is that COVID-19 patients, you know, there's been all this worry about pre-existing conditions, and so they tracked carefully some of the ones with high blood pressure, and they found that the ones that took two different types of high blood pressure medicine then were 2/3 as likely, you know, significantly less likely to have serious symptoms. And these are ACEIs or ARBs. I have a list of them on a slide, but since you can't read the slide, I'll give you the names of some, the brand names. One is Lotensin, Tacad, Capotin, Televan, Vasotec, Avapro, Monopril, Cozar, Zestril, Binocar, Evian, Micardis, Acupril, Diovan, Altase, and Mavic. I don't think I'm taking any of those, and I take high blood pressure medicine. And I'm going to ask my cardiologist, hey, doc, what about this stuff?
Now, you were saying, Richard, that if you take two of them, it improves your chances by about 2/3. What if you only take one of them?
Oh, this is either one of them. They were just looking at patients who were taking blood pressure meds, and with these two different classes, they found both had real positive effects.
When you say two different classes, you've got about 10 there. Well, how does that relate to the two?
Oh, the first list is the on the left are the ACEIs, and on the right
Okay,
are the ARBs.
okay, that's interesting to me because I'm taking one of them because I had a heart operation some years back, uh, got a new valve, and ever since then they've made me take this ramipril altase one. Um, and I'm not aware that I ever had high blood pressure. Normally I don't, but they've got me on it, and presumably now I've got 2/3 less chance
That's
of
great.
dying off when I get it, eh?
That's great. So again,
Wow.
that's why I thought this was a big story. Anything that reduces the risk, especially for us elders, and high blood pressure is amazingly common among our group.
And presumably in Ahihic,
Right,
you don't need prescriptions for any of these. Is that
right.
correct?
I bet that's true. You know what
Interesting.
I will ask my cardiologist first because you know, whatever it is, I've got it in fairly good balance. There's another thing about high blood pressure I found out. If you can keep your high blood pressure at or below 120, which is lower than often when it's treated, but if you keep it that low, then high blood pressure causes these fissures in your brain, and with lower blood pressure, that doesn't happen as much. And I don't want my brain breaking apart.
Nope.
So that's that story. And if you want the list, I can send you the list. Oh, it's in the paper I sent you anyway, Fred.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That's,
So it's there, and I'm glad you're taking one, and I have to check.
okay. Now, Richard, the next story. What's this about artificial intelligence and U.S. military generals? What's that?
Well, you know, for a long time, we have been, that being a few years, excuse me, there are all these autonomous weapon systems that are mainly robotic sentries and battlefield surveillance drones and autonomous submarines. These are systems that are replacing kind of conventional battlefield weaponry. But the Pentagon is trying to take this to the next level by replacing not just ordinary soldiers in their weapons, but replacing admirals and generals with robotic systems. These are in the development system now, and there is a thing that you will hear about sometime. It's the Joint All-Domain Command and Control. The military likes acronyms, so this is JADCC. So we have our acronym, which is the system, and this is, the military thinks that this is necessary because of basically time compression. Back in the day of ICBMs, the generals had about 30 minutes before, after a missile was launched, to do something before the missile came in and detonated. And now we have these hypersonic missiles that this 30 minutes shrinks to about 5 minutes. And that's not very long if you're trying to figure out whether or not to go to war with these other guys. And so they're saying, you know, people no longer can respond as fast with all the information, but that's what you can do with computers. So let's get some computers. and they've already been doing war games using this stuff, testing how they work and refining it. And you know, there's one problem they've found, which is AI decision-making systems lack an ability to assess intent or context. And in warfare, that's a big deal, because maybe they're just doing an exercise, or maybe they're just spoofing you. And to have that call out a nuclear strike by these computers, some people think that's a trouble. And so the author of this article says maybe it's time for the leaders to limit or ban the deployment of hypersonic missiles and other weapons that compress this life and death time. You have to make a decision and you know, maybe save the planet. The problem is, since this takes political people to make agreement, it's hard for me to see how that's going to happen. Anyway, so that's my biggest doom. That's a doom and gloom story. And it's a lot worse than the autonomous weapon system, because this is an autonomous war.
I really don't know what to think about it.
Yeah, anyway, it's trouble. It's trouble, and I don't like it. I don't like it. And I'm afraid they don't ask me.
Richard, I'm having trouble following, matching what you're talking about with the list that I was sent by Fred. And it doesn't seem to follow.
The list that you were sent by Fred has 9 categories, and this is one story from each category. And this was a story in the technology section.
Oh, well, let me find that.
And the title of the story was Artificial Unintelligence in the U.S. Military.
Health medical. Oh.
So it's in the technology section, which is the 3rd section.
Okay, just scrolling, trying to find it here. Technology, environment, energy, materials, technology. Oh yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. So then you're going to the next section.
Now I'm going to the next one, which is fish as a raw input for industrial goods.
Under materials, okay.
And under materials, exactly.
Okay. Got it.
Good, good. I'm glad that you're following along, because these are interesting stories and I think are worth reading.
Yeah.
So these are more kind of material scientists, and they were worrying about the issue that in fish processing, about 60% of fish processing is waste, more than a half. And they worked on salmon, and after salmon are filleted, then all the rest of the stuff is just thrown away. And what they found was an inexpensive way to work with that and to take out high quality fish oil, taste neutral fish protein, and fish gelatin and flame retardant materials. And so they're taking everything out of it. And like the fish oil that is produced by this is higher quality than the existing kind of manufactured fish oil. And so they have figured out how to do it and to essentially save this more than half of the fish stuff that's just thrown away.
Yeah.
So I think that's wonderful.
Better use than feeding the seagulls.
Oh yes, yes. Don't tell the seagulls though. I guess that would be the same case around Lake Chapala with the pelicans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So,
Richard, what's this
yes.
about the Chinese getting into space and raising money for it using our names?
Well, they're not the, in the US, we have SpaceX, and SpaceX is a private company and it's making reusable rockets and stuff like this. And guess what? The Chinese have raised almost $200 million in stock money funding for a private company. It's not SpaceX. They call it ISpace. And so they have copied the idea of the reusable rockets, and I feel like they've copied the SpaceX name too. But it's interesting. The Chinese decided in 2014 to get the companies into space, and there are about 10 different companies now that are private companies that are making rockets and stuff. They're using engineering from the Chinese Space Agency, so they're sharing that information with the private companies. And this commercialization of space, I think, is taking a big step forward now with different significant companies around the world in the game.
And Richard, I've no idea with iSpace. Is it mainly just technology, or are they putting people up with it, or what?
They're working their way up with it now. They have a small rocket that can put stuff in lower Earth orbit. They're working on a bigger rocket that's going to be reusable, that can put 1,000 pounds into orbit around the planet, and they're working their way up. They are using the same idea as SpaceX, though, and they have the rockets then can land vertically like the SpaceX rockets, and so they can be recovered and used again. That really lowers the cost. So we don't know what all they're going to do with it, but I suspect they're not just going to sit them there on the shelf.
Yeah. Interesting.
And right now, SpaceX, by the way, there is a many $1 million a year business at launching things into space. And for a long time, the Russians had the most of that business in the world. Right now, SpaceX has most of that business in the world, and the Russians are getting out of the space business. They're not developing new rockets. So, in a few years, it's going to be the US competing against China.
Interesting.
Anyway, interesting from a lot of different levels.
Yeah. The world is, yeah.
They still say the Chinese, because of their authoritarian government, are not very good at creating new ideas. What they're good at is copying existing ideas. This kind of looks like that to me.
Richard,
Okay.
on the next story, what is this about bacteria being able now to make plastics?
Now, there's an overview before I get into it. I've been saying for some time that in this century, the real revolution is going to be the biological revolution. And one of the things that I'm seeing in different places are what are called biofactories, which are bacteria grown in a special way to produce something that we use. And here they have figured out through basically a 10-year effort a way to use a natural bacterial metabolic pathway that can make ethylene. And ethylene is a common component for plastics and adhesives and coolants and other products. And so instead of getting it from oil, they're able to get it from bacteria that you grow in a vat.
Mm.
Now, it's interesting to me in this, while they are working with this pathway, the biological pathway, they have seen the genetic component is very much like some other pathways that utilize CO2 and turn them into other useful things. So one of the things that they are starting to discover is the details of this biological pathway that bacteria use to make things. So again, this is going to be a big deal because what bacteria can make basically are different proteins and oils. And we use a lot of proteins and oils for different things. So biofactories, just kind of keep that name in your mind and you're going to see more and more examples of it over the next years. The other kind of biofactory they're working madly on are the ones using algae, because algae are the most efficient things on the planet in terms of turning sunlight into material. So that's that story.
Okay. Now, continuing with what we do with the natural world, should we genetically modify plants to make medicines?
Well, this is, I don't think you should ask the should we, because it turns out we already are. And it turns out that one of the ways that you can make what they call biomolecules, and that's like actually what the bacteria are making is a biomolecule. It turns out plants are pretty good at making these molecules, and they have figured out and been working on this for a number of years. And now there are starting to show up in around the world new generations of biological ventures, which they call molecular farms. And they farm things like vaccines. And what they do is fiddle using things like, they're not using CRISPR, but they're using other ways to modify the genome of plants so that the plants can, among other things, make vaccines and biomolecules. They're working on several different COVID vaccines, and they have in production something that makes a biomolecule that can be used to test for COVID. So
Wow.
we're turning plants into factories too. One concern they have with doing this is genetically modified things, and like in Europe, you can't grow genetically modified plants because of European rules. These guys have figured out they're using a strain of tobacco and have figured out how to use it to make some of these biological molecules. And one of the things that they have done to keep it from proliferating in the environment is they've made it where it doesn't bloom and put out seeds. But that they can't grow in Europe either because of their GMOD rules. This is not modifying the genome like the famous GMOD things where you're inserting genes for a poison into a plant. So they say this is very much different, but it's still not allowed.
Yeah, interesting.
You know, so that as we have these new technologies, one of the things that is an issue is it takes a while to figure out how to use them, and there are international political and health concerns and all of these other things that for me, if I had to deal with them, they'd make me go crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Richard, you were saying you think the future of everything is biology. But if we get back to technology and other stuff, we have all this stuff that's accumulated because of what you're doing in technology, in other kinds of stuff. And the question is, before you die, how should you manage the data that you're going to leave so much behind?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I had already thought I have had my life on a PC for 25 years, and I have archives of all the stuff and documents and more than 100,000 photos and all of these things. And one of the things I've been doing is actually making good archives of all the stuff so that after I die, it's all in one place. I still think that probably nobody will care, but you know, anyway. But it turns out besides all of the stuff, what I didn't think about, there are things like Facebook, and I have a blog that has hundreds of visitors a day, and I have a book site and all of these other things. And what happens to that stuff after you die? That's a real issue. Facebook has already around 300 million accounts, 300 million accounts belonging to dead people.
Oh.
And research suggests this can become billions within decades, you know, because there are a lot of users and they all get dead.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that is not well organized is what are platforms such as Facebook doing with the data after death? Do they ever delete it? Can you add to it or change it, or can you monetize it? If I have this website that's getting all those hits, I can monetize it. And then, you know, what assurances do you have that your data will continue to be hosted after you die? So these are issues that are very much new issues. And in these days of COVID, these issues actually are bigger because more people are online in more different ways, and you know, they are sharing more personal information and stuff like this with the internet to do it. And you know, they're not well organized in terms of what they're starting to call digital wills. And, you know, so we have to ask ourselves, when you get to be the age that we are, you know, what kind of digital footprint do I have, and what happens when I die?
And when you say a digital will, what kinds of things might you be able to include in it?
I don't know. I just see the term. I would assume one of the things the digital will shows is what are all the accounts and logins and passwords and that kind of stuff. And then if I was making a digital will, then I would want to say to Carol, there are some fees that are involved. The blog that I say has 1.5 million hits. That costs me about $10 a year to keep it up. And so I want to say to her, that's there. And if you want to keep it, then you have to continue to pay the fees.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Facebook, I don't know about it. I've been on Facebook for 15 years, and I don't know if any of that means anything. God knows, you know,
Yeah.
Facebook knows, excuse me, Facebook knows. I don't mean to promote them.
Yeah. No, I'd never thought of this.
Yeah, neither did I till I saw this article. That's one of the reasons I love doing this, is every week there are things that make me really stand back and think about and consider something that matters to me that I never thought about.
Yeah. Wow.
And
And
you know,
Richard, our last topic, Fitbit apparently can do so much, including personal medical stuff. What's that all about? And should we go down and get one?
I think this is actually a part of a bigger story, which is personal monitors. One of the things that I read in the science stories that I go by each week are different devices that they've come up with that can monitor different kind of health conditions in different ways. A lot of them can be monitored from your wrist. And so Fitbit is the kind of leading company in that area, and they've just released 3 new models. And one of their models, the Fitbit Sense, then is built with sensors to monitor not only your heart rate and things like this, but this one has a sweat reading sensor that detects the small electric changes that can tell if you're in stress. And then it also can monitor your temperature, and it's already monitoring your heart rate and breathing rate and tracking all of this stuff. And they claim that during early testing, they were able to see changes in these metrics that they track that occurred either simultaneously with the onset of COVID-19 symptoms or, quote, in some cases, even before. So here we have these wearables maybe that can play an important part in the early detection of infectious diseases by giving early warning systems. Now this iSense has a battery that lasts about 6 days, and they want you to keep it on all the time, even at night, so it can better monitor your personal health trends. And so this whole personal monitor is another part of technology that in 10 years, people will wonder, how did we ever do without it?
It seems amazing, but what I wonder is, are there any downsides to it all?
Who knows? Who knows? One of the things I know is some people get to be obsessive about these things, and it gives them another thing to obsess about.
Yeah, like one thing that I might obsess about is I gather from another lecture a few years ago at LCS, the guy giving the lecture said, do you know that your Fitbit that you wear now, all of the data on it is owned by 13 different companies.
Okay. And one
Yeah.
of the things they have within that data is one of the modern features is one of these things that tells exactly where you are, so they're able to also track your movements.
Yikes, scary.
Yes, that's scary. I don't know what anybody would do with any of that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's some parts of the future don't seem as good to me, but
No.
it seems like that, you know, it's coming, and mainly we don't have any choice about it. The technology happens before the government figures out how to regulate it. The technology is already distributed in the world before the government can react.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, and
That's true.
yeah.
you know, so who knows?
Well, I
Now,
can imagine, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I can picture all these people walking around with Fitbit-like things in their arms, constantly monitoring their blood pressure or whatever, and just becoming more and more neurotic. Instead of going to a doctor if you actually feel ill, it just seems like a
Right.
lot of asking the ordinary person to interpret things like this. I think it's asking for trouble.
Well, I think as soon as they become common, then one of the things you'll be able to do is download these health analysis programs that will take your Fitbit data and then try to use the advanced AI to replace a doctor. When your Fitbit starts prescribing the new blood pressure medicine for you, then I would wonder.
Oh, I can't imagine walking around being so preoccupied with my health that I can't enjoy, you know, anything else around me. I just would not do that.
Right. But again,
I wonder if we get a lot of this stuff. Are we going to become worried all the time? Like, what does that? What does that?
Well, I think it depends on the person, because some people are worried whether they have the Fitbit or not. And some people are not worried even with 10 Fitbits.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can see people walking along saying, "Oh, I can't do this. My blood pressure is getting too high. I can't do this."
Well,
oh dear.
Now, if your blood pressure goes up when you see a person of the other sex, does that mean that you're attracted or repelled?
Well, they haven't figured out how to tell you, have they?
So that's right. So here we would have the Fitbit integrated with the dating software.